Hi, I'm Deputy Janovic of KSL News Radio, and let's talk about Hunter Biden, the president's son. If you feel a little lost on what is going on with his court case and why he walked into court ready to accept a plea deal and then didn't, well, we had wall-to-wall coverage on the Dave and Dujanovic show. Let's listen.
President Biden's son, Hunter, in a federal court, told the judge this morning he intends to plead guilty to misdemeanor tax charges. There's been some sort of a pause in the hearing. We think that has to do with a gun charge. I mean, believe it or not, as though the tax issue isn't a big enough issue for him. He's also accused of illegally purchasing a gun while he was on drugs and lying on a federal form over his drug use. So the Republicans, we know, are not pleased with this plea deal. He just avoids prison time for the gun charges and for the tax charges. But does he get a sweetheart deal compared to what other convicts get?
Ultimately, that's the real question. And I think that's where a lot of people are getting kind of upset about this, is they want to make sure that just because your dad's the president, that they're not going easy on you. So you have this information. You know what is normal.
Okay, so what is normal? Thanks to the U.S. Sentencing Commission, they actually compile facts on all kinds of crimes and what the end result is for those who plead guilty or are convicted of the crime. So I looked at the tax fraud offenses, and I thought these there's a ton of stats here, and these are the ones that I sort of focused on. I thought it was just, well, this just fits the profile of Hunter Biden. Most are men, most are white, overwhelmingly men, overwhelmingly white. Average age of tax evasion is 52.
Hunter is 53. Okay.
I think that's when maybe people start to feel emboldened to try something new. I don't know. Like, you know what I mean?
Try a new workout
regime. I'm going to buy a fast car. I'm going to get a new girlfriend, and I'm going to start not paying my taxes. And this is to your point, Dave, most do get prison time, almost 70%. And most serve 16 months in prison.
Boom. Not just a little prison time, more than a year.
And that is actually up. I think over a 5-year period, that went up from the average sentence being about 15 months in prison to 16 months in prison. I mean, that's not a huge jump, but hey, a month of your life is an extra month of your life. And in federal prison, Greg Skordas, there is no such thing as parole in the federal system. It's not like they go in for a few months and then the parole board's like, yeah, you've exhibited good behavior. We're going to give you a get out of jail free card. I mean, they might get 10% for good time served if they're, if they're well behaved in prison. But that's about it. So I think that's pretty clear from the facts here that Hunter Biden is getting a sweetheart deal.
Okay, and I've listened to you, and I love you both. I would disagree.
Well, you're the attorney. You're the attorney, and so have at it. Tell us what really happens in court.
So I'm hearing words like tax fraud, tax evasion, that type of thing this morning on your show. And what happened here was that Hunter Biden made a significant amount of money. He reported it. He accurately reported it. He just didn't pay his taxes on it. So it's not like the situation, the cases that you're reading about, Debbie, of people who mislead the IRS. They lie about their income. They don't report income. He reports it. He just didn't have the funds to pay it. And typically in America, those incidents aren't even prosecuted, let alone prosecuted in the way that Hunter Biden has been. So it's a civil fine. The IRS comes down on you hard. They assess penalties. They assess interest, and they get their money, as the IRS always seems to do, by taking your home, by levying on your property, by doing whatever. But typically that conduct, I should say, is not prosecuted criminally. And I would say the same is true about the gun. A person goes to buy a gun, they fill out the Brady form, and they say one of the boxes you check is, are you currently using drugs? I mean, I know it's wrong. I know you're not supposed to do that, but people don't typically say, yeah, I'm a drug user, and they buy the guns. And typically those aren't even prosecuted. Even that particular crime isn't prosecuted. It's usually assessed with a penalty, a fine, that type of a thing. And so, in my opinion, looking at the exact conduct that Hunter engaged in, I don't think he got a sweetheart deal at all. I think just the opposite. He's being made a bit of an example.
The judge has some discretion, right, whether or not to accept or reject the deal. I wasn't really familiar that a judge would reject deals. How does that work? And is that even a possibility?
It's very much a possibility, Dave, and I've had it happen to me before, and it's very heartbreaking when you go in and you cut what you think is a good, fair deal with the prosecutor. The judge says, you know what, I think this is too good of a deal, and this judge could very well do that and say, look, I'm not comfortable with this. You guys go back to the table and give me something with a little more substance.
Does your gut tell you that the judge will accept the plea deal?
Yes. I think that it will go through, and he may give Hunter Biden more time than everyone's expecting, but I think the judge will accept the plea deal.
Hunter Biden in court this morning on tax charges and also a gun charge, and now we're getting reports that the plea deal that was arranged between his defense team and prosecutors appears to be falling apart.
Let's dip into CNN right now that is analyzing this Hunter Biden plea deal that may be in jeopardy.
Well, look, I don't know that anyone was expecting things to fall apart in this sort of spectacular fashion, at least for now. You know, as others have pointed out, they're in recess again, trying to see if they can work through some of these disagreements. But there were signals from David Weiss, the U.S. attorney, that this investigation was ongoing. And everyone was sort of trying to read the tea leaves about what this meant. Did this just mean the investigation was ongoing in the sense that, you know, you have to wait for Hunter Biden to formally enter his plea, for the judge to approve it, for the judge to sign off on the sentencing, or could there be another piece of it?
Now, we expected for it to be kind of a seamless hearing today, but just a short time ago, snafu, and here we are.
Greg Skordas, KSL legal analyst, joins us right now.
Yeah, so the judge is concerned about sort of the totality of the deal and wondering if the gun charge is tied into the tax charges or whether that's sort of independent. And she's also concerned because the government is saying, look, we don't usually prosecute these cases. He lied about the fact that he was a drug user at the time he went to purchase a gun. We're just going to divert it. And the judge said, well, look, you may want to look and see if there are other charges that could be filed. Let's separate the gun charge from the tax charge and try to decide if there's something that can be done with that charge independent of what you guys have contemplated here, which is this pretrial diversion and just be good for 2 years and it'll go away. So I think sort of they're back to the drawing board and I predicted this all wrong, by the way, a few minutes ago, so I apologize. I thought this part of the thing was going to go smoothly, but it's also not surprising that every once in a while there's a hiccup.
Of course, two parties are going to have different views on what the words mean. Lawyers are supposed to use words that really get down to the nitty-gritty and into the weeds so that there are not questions or different interpretations. But in this case, it sounds like there was enough of a difference that this thing kind of, I don't know if it fell apart, but certainly it took a pause and need to go back to the drawing table to figure it out. It sounds like the defense was trying to assert, even weeks back to the time this was announced, that, hey, this is all over, this thing's done, whereas the Department of Justice has said consistently, no, we're still working on some things. That came to bear today in the courtroom, it sounds like. I mean, these are developing stories and facts. Everything is hyper-scrutinized in a case like this. So, the parties are walking on eggshells. It sounds like they're breaking a few eggshells as they walk around. The government's they're smashing them. So it sounds like the government said, hey, this book's not closed. And the defense says, well, then this deal's off. And, they're going to have to go back. Whether they can resolve that today, I don't know. It might take some more time to see if they actually have a deal or not. I'm sure blood rushed to the head, and it's going to take some time to dial back those emotions and see if cooler heads can prevail and see if this thing can be resurrected.
So I think what's happened here is the judges said, like, yo, I don't like how that is connected. There are also those questions of immunity going forward. He's probably not going to get that. And so the judges said, time out. Don't like it. It stinks. We're going to send you guys back to your corners and figure it out.
I think all along what Republicans were seeing is exactly what you described. How does a tax charge and a gun charge get lumped together when they had nothing to do with each other? It was like 1 + 1 = fish. Like, it doesn't make sense why in the world these two would be lumped together. Now, you'll see lots of charges put together if they are all related. Of course, that would make all sorts of sense.
Yeah, if the gun was part of a continuing conspiracy or something of that nature. But it does feel like, what do you say, 1 + 1 = fish?
Yeah.
I like that. Back to our developing story of Hunter Biden entering a not guilty plea after his plea deal that some have said is a sweetheart plea deal fell apart this morning when a judge started really needling some information out of prosecutors and his defense team as well. She didn't like what she was hearing in terms of this plea deal. So let's bring Greg Skordas back on the line with us, our legal analyst here. Been a prosecutor, you've been a defense attorney. What's next now that the judge has said you need to go back to your rooms, both sides, and so entering more briefs?
Well, and I think that's exactly what they'll do, Debbie. The judge said, look, there were some loose ends, and oftentimes with these plea bargains, the devil's in the details, and the two parties just hadn't worked those out. There may have been some things that they didn't even anticipate, but the judge, to her credit, was not going to leave things unhandled, leave things open for another day. And she said, look, I want this to be the last time I see Hunter Biden in my courtroom if we're going to do a deal. If not, plead not guilty and let's schedule it for trial and see what happens. So I do think that this was generally a good thing. We're not going to have problems down the road with this, but I think they'll be back in front of this judge here in pretty short order in the next week or two and get this thing done.
If they don't reach another plea deal that the judge feels comfortable with, it just goes on to trial, doesn't it?
Yes, and what remains to be seen, Debbie, is what would go to trial, because the misdemeanor was essentially a plea bargain. It was a reduced charge from what maybe could have been. The gun charge was a diversion, and so the judge is saying, we need to put up or shut up. I can't imagine that the government wants to go to trial. I'm certainly Hunter Biden and his counsel don't want to go to trial on this. So there's a lot of incentive for both sides to resolve the case and not go to trial because we don't even know what they would go to trial on. We don't know what the exact charges are, because what we were dealing with today were the reduced plea bargain charges to get the case resolved. So the government may say, no, we're going to trial. We're going to go on everything we've got. And the defense may say, hey, you're locked into this, so we'll see what happens.
Greg Skordas, thank you for being with us. The last 3 hours, it has been unfolding in a pretty wild way, but Hunter Biden, the plea deal ultimately was never finished. It was never agreed to. So he put in a not guilty plea and back to the drawing board.